So I just want to bring this up, because you will see this sort of stuff, over and over again, especially for those of you who are moving on to a 4-year university. You will see the price of textbooks, continuing to increase, and you will also see more and more pressure for professors to adopt books or material that is just internet based, that is open sourced, or using there's a particular license, a particular open copyright license for that sort of stuff. If you go to Wikipedia, basically all the material at Wikipedia are using that particular license. Is it open, common? Can't remember the exact name of the license.
GPL? GPL?
No, it's not GPL. It's basically the equivalent of GPL, but for published, articles and material. Let me see if I can find that. Policy, disclaimer, Creative Commons, attribution license. So basically, the author does not retain the right and say other people cannot edit, other people cannot copy, and so on and so forth. And as a result, anyone can go in and anyone can change, the material on Wikipedia. I think it would be great, if all professors, teaching the same discipline, like everyone teaching cisp300 or classes like this. If I post my material and other people continue to work on it, in a few years it will be like publication ready. Because it's not just me working on it; it's a whole bunch of other people also working on the same material. Unfortunately, that's not likely to happen, in the near future. But I think when you guys go into in a couple of years, you will see more and more pressure to move in that direction. A lot of textbook companies do not even yet realize the web resource, how much that will change the future landscape of textbooks. They're still in the mindset of bookstores, physical textbooks, and so on and so forth. They have not even moved on to ebooks. I think we'll see a lot of publishers, basically vanishing because of that. They do not realize, how much stuff people can get online now. Okay, so we'll just take this one out. Okay, so this is an interesting read, because it's not the first time, that someone has mentioned about, let's make textbooks online and make them all free. It's just that, this is the most recent one, just today. So what we'll do is we'll first take a look at the homework assignment that was due about 4 or 5 minutes ago, and then we'll continue to talk about the practice final, because I do want to give you guys a look of the practice final. I send you guys an email telling you that it is ready. So if anyone wants to play with it, you can play with it. I mean, you can push all the buttons, nothing will explode, and you have an unlimited number of attempts. So if you mess up one, hey, no problem. Just reattempt until you get used to the interface. So we'll get there after we talk about the homework assignment. Any questions at this point? No questions? Okay. So if I refresh, it grays out, today's date and time because it's already due. Are there any questions, before we actually do the trace for this particular homework assignment? No questions? Okay. Okay, well, let's go ahead and trace the homework assignment. Yep, go ahead.
On line 18.
Line 18, yes.
Do you print K after it's been changed a few times?
Yep.
Okay.
Well, you print the value of K, whatever it is, by the time you get to line 18. So you only print it once. Okay, you're not printing the value of K as it is getting changed. You're only printing it once after you print the value of the invocation. And then you print it only once. So we'll go ahead and take a look at this program. This program looks kind of long, but it's not really that bad. Okay, I think it's not as bad as the previous one, the one that I said I would turn into extra credit. So let me save it first into today's folder. and then we'll work on it. The only thing is, it kind of takes up a lot of space, makes it a little difficult for me to look at everything at the same time. We have comments. We have the usual line number. There are no global variables, so the precondition, there's nothing to say about the precondition. Next line would be the first line in the entire program, which is line 20. It has to be the first line outside of the definition of subroutines. Line 20 is going to invoke main, so we have to at least allocate one column for return line number. Main has a local variable k, which means we also have to allocate for variable k. But because k is a local variable, it always starts with an unknown value. It is very important to remember that question mark here. Okay? In this class, it seems like it's just an extra thing. I'm just being, extra, strict about this sort of thing. But when you write programs in C, not remembering that a local variable starts with an unknown value can bite you, because it really starts with a unknown value. Sometimes the unknown value just so happens to work out if you don't remember to initialize the variable, and other times it does not work out. In other words, not remembering a local variable has an unknown, undetermined value can make a program sometimes work and other times does not work. Okay, so that's really, really bad because it's not consistent. The return line number in this case is just post because there's nothing after line 20. And then we continue execution in main. Line 16 is the first line that has any action in main. All it does is to initialize k to 0. Then we go to line 17. Line 17 is a whole bunch of operations, but the first thing we have to do is to invoke the subroutine. Once we figure out what is the return value, then we can actually go ahead and print something. So in order to invoke the subroutine S4, we have to allocate, a few columns in this case. First of all, we need return info because after we return from S4, we are not moving on to line 18. We are going back to line 17 to continue what is not done yet on line 17. So that's why the return info will basically just spell out line 17, but replace the invocation with a question mark as a placeholder. Once we know where to go back to, we can set up the parameters. We have two parameters in this case. We have parameter n as well as parameter x. Parameter n is passed by value, which is indicated by both the right arrow and also by val inside the subroutine. So that means we just have to make column F have a particular value of 2. X on the other hand is passed by reference, which is indicated by the double-sided arrow as well as by ref inside the subroutine definition. That means X becomes an alias of the argument. The argument in this case is local variable K, and local variable K currently lives in column D as well. That's why X is an alias of column D. Do we have any questions at this point when we set up the columns? No questions? Okay. Now once we set up column E, F, and G, we can move into the subroutine, starting on line 4. On line 4, we are just asking, does n equal to 0? The answer is nope, n equals to 2. So then we have to move on to line 6. Line 6 is asking, does n equal to 1? It is also false. So we have to go all the way to line 10 in this case for the else. Line 10 itself does not really do much. All it does is to add 1 to X and then store the result back into X. X is an alias of column D. Column D has a value of 10. Let me turn that off. And since it had a value of 0, adding 1 to it will make it 1, and we are storing it back into column D. And as a result, column D now has a value of 1. Then we go to line 11. Line 11 is kind of a long line because it has 1, 2, 3, 4. There are 4 things to do. Well, kind of roughly. There are actually more than that. But roughly, we have to first invoke S4 using n minus 1 as the argument. Then you have to invoke S4 with n minus 2 as the argument. Then you have to add those two numbers, and then you can return the sum of those two numbers. That means I cannot do anything until I have invoked both the right-hand side and the left-hand side, starting with the left-hand side. The left-hand side is this portion here, and that's what we are going to do first. Well, since we are going to invoke S4, that means we have to set up some columns just like last time, even though the content of the columns would not be exactly the same as last time. The first column to allocate is going to be the return info column, and then we have parameter n as well as parameter x. Parameter x is the easy one because we are passing an alias along. In other words, this one is also an alias of column D. N is the next easiest one because we are using the n of the current context. The n of the current context has a value of 2. 2 minus 1 is 1, so the new parameter n has a value of 1. Okay, so let me just... The return info in this case is the entire line 11, but with the invocation that I am doing right now replaced by a single question mark, which is the left-hand side. So if I don't want to save any time, I can just type the entire thing out again. Return, and then the question marks to replace the left invocation, and then plus the right invocation spelled out exactly like it is in the pseudocode. Invoke S4, n minus 2 specifies n, and x specifies x, like that. Okay. Are there any questions about columns H, I, and J at this point? Once we set up the columns, we go back into the subroutine starting on the first line of the subroutine, which is line 4. The first line that has any action. Now we check again. N equals to 0 is once again false. We have to go to line 6 because this is a multi-branch conditional statement. Line 6 is checking whether n equals to 1, and it is true this time. Well, that makes it easy because if it is true, then we just go to line 7. Line 7 is adding 1 to x again. X is an alias of column D. Column D already has a value of 1 at this point. 1 plus 1 is 2. So that's why column D is updated to a value of 2 on line 7. Then we move on to line 8. Line 8 is returning the value of x. X is an alias of column D. Column D has a value of 2 right now. So what we are doing right now is returning a value of 2. Okay? So you just have to remind yourself what you have to do with a return statement. There are only 3 things to do. 1, locate the rightmost return info cell. 2, copy and paste it. 3, you change the question mark to the value that you're returning. But do not do anything other than these 3 steps. So here we have the first step, locating the return info cell. 2, copy and paste it. And 3, changing the question mark itself to a value of 2. I am now done with line 8 of the pseudocode. After line 8, I get out of the conditional statement, which makes me go all the way to the end, which is on line 13. Line 13 is the end of the subroutine, which means we have to deallocate the columns that we allocated for this invocation. Okay, one too many. There we go. After the end of the subroutine, we have to figure out where are we going back to. We're going back to line 11. That's the entire purpose of the return info cell, is to tell me where do I go to continue execution at the end of a subroutine. That tells me to go back to line 11. But not only that, we also know that by the time we get to line 11, the left invocation is already resolved. It is